Your dog is 3 feet behind you. Again, you walked to the kitchen to pour a glass of water and they followed. You moved to the couch and they moved. You stood up to check the window and they were already repositioning before you sat back down. Most people have a name for this. They call it clinginess. They call it insecurity. They assume their dog is anxious, needy, or dependent in some way that probably needs to be fixed. But the science tells a completely different story. What your dog is doing when they follow you through every room of your house is not a symptom of anxiety. It is not a behavioral flaw. It is one of the most sophisticated social behaviors documented in the animal kingdom, and it says something extraordinary about who your dog actually is. Think about the anxiety explanation for a moment. If following you were driven purely by fear of being alone, you would expect the behavior to be consistent, desperate, and indiscriminate. A dog following out of anxiety would follow anyone. They would track strangers with the same intensity. They would escalate every time you reached for your keys or your coat. They would show visible distress, panting, pacing, whining, every time the following was interrupted. But here is what most dog owners notice when they stop to think about it. Their dog does not follow the house guest with the same dedication. They do not track the neighbor who sometimes feeds them with the same focus. The following is specific. It is targeted. It is, and this is the part the anxiety explanation cannot account for, it is chosen. Which raises a question that most dog behavior content never actually asks. If it is not anxiety driving this behavior, what is it? In 2015, researchers at the Eotvos Lorand University in Budapest, Hungary, published findings from a study now considered foundational in canine attachment science. The study observed 82 adult dogs across a structured series of behavioral tests designed to identify not just whether dogs form attachments to their owners, but what kind of attachment and how it compares to attachment behaviors documented in human infants. What they found was not a simple preference. Dogs demonstrated what psychologists call a secure base effect, a phenomenon previously documented almost exclusively in mother-infant bonding. In the presence of their owner, dogs explored more freely, engaged more confidently with unfamiliar objects, and returned to their owner at regular intervals, as if checking in before venturing further. Remove the owner, and that exploratory confidence collapsed entirely, even when a friendly stranger was present as a substitute. The dogs were not simply following because they needed company. They were following because you, specifically, are their anchor to a feeling of safety that nobody else in the world can replicate. What your dog does every morning when they get up and walk toward wherever you are is not anxiety. It is trust expressed through proximity. Go one layer deeper into the biology, and the picture becomes even more striking. When your dog looks at you, really looks at you, the sustained mutual gaze that happens when they follow you into a room and wait for your eyes to meet theirs, their brain releases oxytocin. You already know oxytocin as the bonding hormone. You know it from the flush of connection between a new mother and her child, from the warmth of reunion after absence, from the biochemical signature of love. What a team of researchers at Asabu University in Japan demonstrated in 2015 was that in dogs and humans, mutual gaze triggers a measurable oxytocin loop. The dog gazes at the owner. Oxytocin rises in both the dog and the human. That rise in the human causes them to interact more warmly. That warmer interaction drives the dog's oxytocin higher still. The loop self-reinforces. Take Fumi Kikusui, the lead researcher, noted that this same oxytocin feedback mechanism through eye contact had never been documented between humans and any other domesticated species, not cats, not horses, not any of the other animals that have lived alongside us for thousands of years, only dogs. The mechanism exists in wolves, but only weakly and only under specific conditions. Somewhere in the process of domestication, dogs did not simply learn to follow us. They developed a neurological bond architecture that mirrors one of the most powerful bonding systems in human biology. That domestication process is longer and stranger than most people imagine. The earliest confirmed archaeological evidence of deliberate dog burial alongside a human comes from a site in what is now northern Israel, dated to approximately 12,000 years before the present. The skeleton of a small dog was found positioned beside an elderly human, the dog's head resting near the human's hand, placed in a way that looked unmistakably intentional, not discarded, placed. For 12,000 years, possibly longer. Some genetic analyses push the divergence of domestic dogs from wolves back to between 15,000 and 40,000 years ago, Dogs have been living in the immediate proximity of humans, not nearby, not adjacent, inside the same sleeping space, sharing warmth, following the same person through the same territory day after day. What your dog is doing when they trail you from the kitchen to the bedroom to the backyard is not a behavior that developed last year or last decade. It is the expression of an adaptation refined across hundreds of generations of selection for exactly this, for staying close, staying attentive, and staying bonded to one particular human above all others. The dog at your heels is carrying something ancient, something shaped by every generation of their ancestors who survived because they stayed close to theirs. Now here is where the science surprises most people. If following behavior were purely about attachment and security, you would expect it to increase during stressful moments and decrease when the dog felt calm and confident. Dogs that are more confident, better trained, and more behaviorally balanced should follow less. That is the logical prediction. A study published in the journal Applied Animal Behavior Science, examining 63 dogs across varying levels of training, found the opposite. Dogs that scored highest on behavioral confidence measures, dogs rated by trainers as self-assured, low anxiety, and well-adjusted, showed following behavior with the same frequency as less confident dogs. In some subgroups, confident dogs followed more. The researchers proposed that following in these dogs was not a stress response at all. It was a preference behavior, something the dog did because they wanted to, not because they were driven to by distress. High-confidence dogs followed because the owner was the most interesting, most rewarding, most socially rich presence in their environment. The behavior looked identical from the outside, but the internal driver was entirely different, which means you cannot tell from the following alone whether your dog is anxious or simply deeply, freely attached. And understanding which one it is matters more than most people realize. The deepest layer of this science involves something researchers have only begun to describe in the last decade and almost nobody in mainstream dog content has discussed yet. It is called behavioral synchrony, and it refers to something beyond simple preference or attachment. In 2022, a research team at the University of Vienna conducted a study measuring physiological markers, specifically cortisol levels and heart rate variability, in both dogs and their owners over a period of several weeks. What they found was that dogs and their long-term owners had become physiologically synchronized. When the owner's stress levels rose, the dog's cortisol followed within a measurable window. When the owner's heart rate variability indicated calm, the dogs matched it. This was not a short-term response to an acute stimulus. It was a stable, ongoing entrainment. The dog's nervous system had essentially calibrated itself to mirror the owner's. The dogs who showed the strongest synchrony were, according to the behavioral data, the ones who spent the most time in close physical proximity to their owner. The ones who followed. The following was not the symptom of the bond. The following was the mechanism of it. Every time your dog gets up and walks to the room where you are, they are not just choosing to be near you. They are maintaining the biological attunement that keeps their nervous system aligned with yours. They are doing what their neurological architecture demands, staying close enough to keep reading you. There is one more thing you need to know, and this part matters. Following behavior changes. It shifts in character and intensity over time, and some of those shifts are not about love or preference at all. They are signals. A dog who suddenly begins following with a new intensity. A dog who was independent and is now hypervigilant about proximity. A dog who follows and then seems confused or disoriented once they arrive. A dog who follows but no longer shows the relaxed tail posture and soft eyes associated with voluntary close following. That dog may be communicating something clinical. A 2019 review published in Veterinary Sciences identified increased proximity seeking and following behavior as one of the early behavioral markers of canine cognitive dysfunction syndrome, the dog equivalent of age-related dementia. In that context, increased following is not deepened attachment. It is a navigation behavior, the dog using the owner as a spatial and emotional anchor because their own internal map of the world is becoming unreliable. The review noted that in dogs over 10 years of age showing new or intensified following behavior, cognitive assessment was warranted in a significant proportion of cases. Your dog cannot tell you that something feels wrong. They cannot describe confusion or fear or the strange experience of a world that no longer makes complete sense. They can only do this: stay closer, follow more. Your job is to know the difference between a dog who follows because they are profoundly bonded to you and a dog who follows because they need help. So go back to that moment. You stood up from the couch. You walked to the kitchen. 3 feet behind you, your dog followed. That moment is not clinginess. It is not anxiety. It is the end result of 12,000 years of co-evolution, a neurological bonding loop borrowed from mother-infant biology, a physiological synchrony that links your nervous system to theirs, and a behavioral preference so specific that it targets you and only you with a precision no other animal on Earth has developed toward a human being. Your dog is not following you because they cannot be alone. They are following you because being near you is the most meaningful thing in their world. The science does not make that smaller. It makes it stranger, older, and more real than most people ever stop to consider. If your dog follows you everywhere, tell me in the comments, do they track you through every single room, or is there one specific place in the house where they always wait for you to come back? I want to know. And if this video changed how you see what your dog is doing, subscribe, because next time we are looking at why dogs tilt their head when you talk to them, and the neurological mechanism behind it is far stranger than you would expect.